Welcome to the Rev and the Rav, a program of dialogue and discovery between two faith traditions here at Andover Newton Theological School and Hebrew College. I'm Danny Lehmann, president of Hebrew College.
And I'm Nick Carter, president of Andover Newton Theological School. Our subject this morning is physician-assisted dying. It's an issue that has found its way to the ballot here in Massachusetts. It's a topic that is widely discussed around the country and one of great concern. We thought we would spend a little time today exploring that, both from the question of faith tradition, but also our personal feelings. Danny, talk to me a little bit about how Judaism looks at the whole question of physician-assisted dying, or perhaps suicide in general.
Well, there seems to be a rare consensus among the different streams of Judaism as expressed here in North America, that the Jewish tradition clearly takes a negative view of any type of suicide, and certainly any attempt to assist someone in suicidal actions. The Reform, Conservative, and Orthodox rabbinate here in North America have studied this issue as it has emerged in the context of political life here in our society, and all three have come out with various declarations, task forces, committee recommendations against enacting any kind of legislation which would allow for physician-assisted dying. And it really stems from a religious perspective in which God is the God of life. We are instructed to choose life. And there's rabbinic stories which talk about martyrdom, certainly as something which is at times required and certainly historically has taken place. But that is only as a result of external forces at play, where there's a religious need to make a stance and a claim for one's religious faith. But in terms of taking one's own life, there are stories and cases in which the rabbis are clearly against hastening one's death. And certainly in today's situation, we're dealing with cases where people at the end of their life don't have to suffer in terms of physical pain. And it's been pointed out that in Oregon, where the law was enacted, most of the patients who are using this opportunity to commit suicide in the last months of their life are in hospice and are, in the situations in which they should be comfortable.
Mm. Can't say that Christianity is a great deal different. Of course, there is an enormous spectrum in Christianity. If you wanted to put the Roman Catholic Church at one end of the spectrum and go all the way through the Reformed and Free Church tradition, you could find some moderating positions. And I think the moderation comes not so much from a change in the basic theological belief in the sanctity of life, and that only God can take a life, but more on the sense of compassion, that there is a moderating influence as compassion rises for those who suffer. Mm-hmm. And it reaches a point, I think, of, at best, neutrality. I can't think of a particular tradition who said openly that they would endorse physician-assisted suicide, or just simply suicide straight up, but more a sense of that there are other factors in play, and suffering becomes such a significant feature, right, that it begins to moderate the whole question of the sanctity of life.
But it seems that in this case, the overriding focus of those people who are pushing for this legislation, and in fact people who have used it in other states, is the issue of autonomy and control. And it's interesting within the Jewish community that the Reform movement, which is the greatest champion of religious autonomy, still takes the position that there are limits to that autonomy, and one of those limits is that the taking of your own life, even though that may be in some ways the most compelling expression of one's control and autonomy, that is still something that religiously is unacceptable. And we, both at Andover, Newton, and Hebrew College, sponsored a program not long ago, a public conversation about this issue in which we had both Christian and Jewish perspectives, and the perspectives of philosophy and the medical profession presented. And there was a lively conversation about not only the religious perspective, but should we as citizens of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts in this case be imposing that religious tradition, which looks askance at any kind of suicide or assisted suicide, should we be imposing that upon the general public when it seems that, at least the way the legislation is structured, this very well may be a completely rational option and choice for people?
Well, I think that, there are two sets of issues there. One is just the question of physician-assisted suicide. The other is the advocacy of religious people in the public square. I'm a firm believer that while it's important for us to have a separation of church and state, that doesn't mean that people who are driven by faith should shy away from the public square. I think we belong in the public square, but and we should advocate with great vigor for what we believe. We will have to live with the outcome if we don't take the case. But I think we need to be there. And I think the question of autonomy is a very interesting one. My tradition is one that believes very strongly in autonomy, but it's not autonomy from, it's autonomy for. It's to have unmediated exercise of one's faith tradition, faith
conscience.
Belief, and conscience, and to not have somebody else telling me what I should believe. But that belief is so that I can be faithful to God, or in a sense, more faithful. And it means that I should be more engaged in these questions, and I don't look at some denominational authority to tell me what I should believe.
Right.
That I believe in soul freedom to be able to sort that through. It doesn't hand me a quick and easy answer. In fact, it gives me a great sense of responsibility to sift it through.
But I'm still concerned also about the imposition of religious views when it comes to something that seems to be both an expression of the will of the majority of the citizens, number one, and number two, something that doesn't impose restrictions on anybody, meaning it's not as if I can't continue to be faithful to my tradition that says that assisted dying or suicide is wrong, and in fact this doesn't impose any obligation upon physicians actually to participate. So whether we should be making it impossible for people to exercise this option is something that still is unclear to me.
Well, there's a basic ethical question there, particularly for societies as they struggle with who they are, the character of the society. And it raises a question of, just because we have the scientific capability of doing something, should we do it? It goes to a whole question of weapons, of genetic research, a whole series of things, cloning, there's a wide spread of advances of science that open the door to significant possibilities, some of which are very exciting, but also some of which cross a line of the difference between being able to do something and actually asking a question of should we do something. And I think we have an obligation as people of faith to be very much engaged on the should side. Right. You know, I think we should be speaking clearly on this one. Now, it's interesting when you get down to the question of what do I personally feel about all of this. And I must say, I don't want to bind others. I believe in that freedom, that I think that people should have a choice, and I don't want to be in the way of imposing my faith on top of somebody else. On the other hand, I want to make as compelling an argument as I can for not only just for us as individuals, but for the community of which I'm a part. And for me, in this particular case, I have to confess that I am against it.
So I think the issue for me is, in fact, are there cultural issues, unforeseen implications that we need to consider beyond just the right of people to make these kinds of decisions for themselves? Does it have a larger impact on our cultural values? And I think we need to think about whether the legislative process in this particular case should allow for this to be developed as a result of a ballot initiative. So I'm torn. My religious tradition clearly makes a particular claim about this against. And it's one of those cases where my life as a citizen and my life of a religious person has to be worked out in complex ways.
Well, thanks, Danny. We could go on for quite some time on this one, and maybe we'll come back at another time. Folks, we thank you for joining us for this portion of the Rev and the Rav. We invite you to join us next time. Peace.
Shalom.